folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. Well, we have arrived at phase 2 of the Gaza peace plan, and here is where it gets tricky. Of course, 20 live hostages, thank God, were returned to Israel by Hamas demons on Monday. And by the way, Hamas still is holding on to the remains of 19 deceased hostages who were murdered on and after October 7th by Hamas. So already they're not following the deal. Again, there were the remains of 28 deceased hostages, and only remains of 9 have been returned. So Hamas has yet to turn over the remains of 19 others. That's number one. Number two, we hear more and more from Hamas officials, those left who the IDF hasn't eliminated, that they are refusing to disarm. And a big question here is, who's going to disarm them? Especially because right now, folks, we see Hamas going on a killing spree in Gaza, murdering not only rival factions there, but also so-called Israeli collaborators. Hamas is literally lining people up in the streets of Gaza City and other cities in Gaza and murdering them, executing them in cold blood. Now, we know at least 33 people have been killed by Hamas so far since Monday alone. A Gazan from Khan Yunis, one of the officials in that city, just this morning, reports emerging from him saying, no, Hamas has killed hundreds of people. And we're also hearing reports that they're killing, surprise, surprise, women and children. Would you expect any less from a modern-day Nazi demonic death cult? This is who Hamas is. And it's strange that the so-called pro-peace movement, which howled about the supposed Israeli genocide, the supposed forced Israeli starvation of Gazans, is now very, very silent. Now that there's a true mass murder spree happening in Gaza, courtesy of Hamas, they're not saying very much, if at all. Oh, the French government released a statement saying they are particularly concerned. So they're concerned about it. On the flip side, if Israel accidentally, God forbid, killed one person, a civilian, that Hamas had used as a human shield, by the way, during the war in Gaza, France would have issued full-blown condemnations. We know how this goes. Statements from the UN Security Council, it goes on and on. But when Hamas is slaughtering men, women, and children, its rivals in Gaza, crickets chirping, except from President Trump. President Trump today on Truth Social issued a statement saying, and I'm paraphrasing, but this is pretty much what he said, if Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, we will have no choice but to go in and kill Hamas. Now, when he says that, I don't believe he means American soldiers. I think he's saying, look, I'll unleash the IDF to finish the job. Because again, I start off this newscast by saying that's a big concern. Phase 2 is the disarmament of Hamas. And phase 1's not complete yet if the remains of those 19 hostages are not returned. But the big key here, the disarmament of Hamas. Who ensures that that happens? Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, color me skeptical that they'll get the job done. So at the end of the day, you're going to see Hamas here playing games, stringing things out, sandbagging the world. Look, they've already played games here, not returning the remains of 19 hostages as they had agreed upon. They haven't disarmed yet. So something tells me, call me crazy, in covering Hamas, covering the region for close to 25 years, that Hamas isn't going to willingly give up its arms. Again, call me crazy. But hey, folks, look, before we get to our interview with Victor Davis Hanson, one of the world's preeminent historians, quick mention, some good news. The Houthis, that other Iranian proxy in that ring of fire that surrounds Israel, announced today that their military chief, Mohammed al-Gamari, was killed in that August 28th Israeli strike in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a, which wiped out a good chunk of the Houthi leadership. Gamari has now, and he's the head of military operations for the Houthis in Yemen. He has apparently now succumbed to his wounds. So that Iranian ring of fire just continues to collapse and be reduced to a smoldering heap of ruins. And we're talking about all of this. We've been covering this since October 7th, well before October 7th, but since October 7th in particular, we've been working overtime here, quite literally, and we're bringing you the inside story of what's happening in the world's most volatile and chaotic region and how it affects you no matter where you live. And also we're doing it from an unapologetically biblical perspective. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Hey, the one and only Victor Davis Hanson joined me on the Stakelbeck Tonight Show, my nightly show on TBN, to break down how exactly President Trump is doing it. Meaning, how has he put an end to 8 wars, including Israel-Gaza, Israel-Hamas, which, look, there'll still be some fighting there, I think, in the days to come, as we've been discussing. But overall, the hostages are home, and Hamas has no leverage, and their last days are staring them in the face right now. So how has Trump done it? On the world stage, speaking at the Knesset, then in Egypt, everyone's clamoring, all the world leaders, to be around him. What is his recipe for success? Hint, hint, peace through strength is where it starts. But Victor Davis Hanson, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, host of the Victor Davis Hanson Show. You can check him out here on YouTube, and also does some great work for the Daily Signal. Sat down with him for some great insights. Take a look. Victor, always great to see you. Hey, can you, and you've talked about this on your show, can you break down a bit how relationships play a role in President Trump's diplomatic approach, including in this Israel-Hamas deal? It seems he'll talk to anyone and everyone, and he always has leverage, Victor, in every talk that he enters into.
He does, and it's also the contrary, that if you don't have those relationships, you don't make progress. So he was on good terms with all the major players, the Netanyahu government, the moderate Arab regimes, the Turkish government, the Egyptian government. And unlike Joe Biden, to be frank, Joe Biden had called the Saudis pariahs. And earlier, Barack Obama had leaked and used a very derogatory term of the Netanyahu government at the time, chicken blank. I won't repeat it on the air. But the point was, he had alienated, the Biden-Obama administrations had alienated a lot of people that were, and they had alienated the Israeli conservative government. And then, in addition to that, very quickly, Donald Trump, he did not really have much confidence in the EU, the Europeans, and the Russians basically just ignored them. They lost the Syrian client. They were out of it. The Chinese were out of it. The United Nations, he did not have confidence. So this was the first time that the Americans had dealt directly on their terms with the two parties that matter, the Arabs and the Israelis. And he was able also to convince them that prosperity and security were a result of peace, and it wasn't just diplomaties. So I think it was also important that the people who negotiated for a change were not professional diplomats. So you had 3 builders, Weisskopf and Jared Kushner and Donald Trump. They came from a very different milieu, and they had a different way of conducting business and deals than did an Anthony Blinken or Hillary Clinton in the past, or John Kerry. So I think it was just a complete antithesis of what we'd seen in the Middle East, and everybody that therefore made the wrong conclusion that was going to fail. There was very intricate when the Israelis attacked the Qataris on the grounds that they were double dealing. Al Jazeera propaganda came out of there, and also the Hamas hierarchy, what's left of it, was there. Trump saw that as an opportunity, and he said, you have to apologize to them, and he kind of co-opted them, and they came right back to Trump and said, we want to be protected. They were so, I guess the term would be, terrified after that strike, that he offered them a protectorate, and one of the conditions apparently is that they no longer host Hamas, and the same is true of Turkey. So everything was a quid pro quo in which he used enhanced American prestige. And he did not, of course, oversee the pullout from Afghanistan that was humiliating, or, tell Putin don't when it didn't mean anything. Yeah. Or as Obama said to the Syrians, if I see, this is a red line, and then he just ignored that. So there was a sense that when Donald Trump said something, you better pay attention to it, whether it was bombing the Iranian facilities or the elimination of Soleimani in the first term, or Baghdadi, or the Wagner Group in Russia. So he had a reputation for being, I guess the word would be unpredictable, but predictable in fulfilling his threats.
Yeah. And outside the box. One of the things I love about him, Victor, is he is an outside the box thinker, and we're seeing the art of the deal on the world stage now. About a minute before the break, then you'll be right back with us. Can you talk about the role economic pressure plays here, Victor? Tariffs and President Trump kind of nudging these nations to get on board with his initiatives.
Yeah, he's basically saying that entry or exit in the and access, entry or no access into the huge, lucrative American domestic consumer market will depend on your attitude toward the United States and its interests. So if you want to help us get a lasting peace, it's not only in your interest, but it is your economic interest as a trader of the United States that will be given favorable terms under our tariffs agreement. And that was a huge incentive for a lot of the Arab. And then the other thing very quickly is they understood that these new technologies, cryptocurrency, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, robotics, they're not just going to be Chinese anymore. It looks to the Silicon Valley people, there's been a revolution in the United States, and they are emerging as the preeminent innovators of these new technologies. And I think a lot of people in the Gulf, to take that example, want to cut deals with the Americans and get access to these new emerging fields. And that was new. And Trump used that as well as an incentive.
Victor, do you get the sense that Democrats have badly overplayed their hand here with this shutdown? Their party is already massively unpopular with the American people. This doesn't seem to help their cause very much.
Yeah, I think they would say that privately. I think the contrast this week was really too bad for them, because you had Trump striding like a colossus over the Middle East, with the Europeans trying to fly to Egypt to meet him, everybody wanting to share in his achievement. And then you had these kind of petulant Democrats that couldn't say a nice word about this landmark peace deal, ceasefire deal in the Middle East. And then they were incoherent. They never really communicated to the American people why they shut down the government, given their long record of opposing anybody who did that. And they said they would never do that, and Republicans did it in the past, and that was a mistake. Then they got into the illegal alien, and everybody, I think, knows, who goes to an emergency room, to take one example, in the American Southwest where I live, Central California, that illegal aliens are getting health care and free health care. And in California, the government just gave another $5 billion to bail out Medi-Cal, our version of Medicaid. And yet they kept denying that. And a lot of millions of people said, that's not true. I can see it with my own eyes. So they weren't candid. They weren't transparent. And I think now they were trying to find a way to get out of it by ginning up the ICE protest, creating chaos so that people, proverbially the American people, sort of get into a fetal position, put their hands over their ears and say, make it all go away. And I don't know whose fault it is, but I just want to, that's their goal, that just create so much chaos with the demonstrations, the shutdown, that some of it will be collateral damage on Trump and especially the economy. That's not been spoken, but you shut down the government for a month or two, it will have a sharp reduction in GDP. And I think they want that.
Yeah, and members of the military aren't getting paid. It's absolute madness. And yet, President Trump continues to plow ahead. Victor, taking it back to the international stage, okay, the Middle East, peace breaking out suddenly, at least for now. Does he shift his attention now more to dealing with Russia, Ukraine, and perhaps China? And that whole threat, the semiconductor, the chip threat there, can he maybe refocus and shift a bit and rechannel his energies to dealing with those threats?
Well, I think he would also say that one of the reasons he was successful in the Middle East is he had negotiated Ethiopia and Egypt, or Thailand and Cambodia, or Pakistan, India, Kosovo, Serbia, et cetera, et cetera. And so he, in that way of thinking, he was going to bring that momentum, and he did, to the Middle East. And people in the Middle East said, well, this guy's different. He's had this success elsewhere. And now I think he's going to use this success to apply it to the Ukraine, which is going to be a little bit more tricky, because you're dealing with a former superpower with 7,000 nuclear weapons. It's not just, thousands of people, but it's been 1.5 million probably dead, wounded, or missing right on the doorstep of Europe. And that's going to be more challenging. And I think everybody knows what the settlement will be. Ukraine will not be in NATO, but it will be armed to the teeth. It'll have to give up for good Crimea and Donbass, but it will try to hold on to land pretty much where it is now. We can have a ceasefire in place, and then we'll have to have security guarantees, and then Putin will say, I can't take that back to the oligarchs of my military because I've got 1 million Russians dead, wounded, and killed, and they're going to ask me, what did I get? And that's not enough. So that's going to have to be worked out. But the battlefield will adjudicate that, whoever is making the greater progress. And that's going to be tricky because if we give them Tomahawk missiles, which are justified strategically to help the Ukraine recapture the momentum, you're still using a proxy to attack the homeland of a nuclear rival, something we never did in the Cold War. So it's a lot more tricky even than the Middle East. And China, of course, that's not so much a military question outside of Taiwan, but it's who's going to blink first as far as the tariffs and trade. Everybody knows what China is doing. Everybody knows it's a mercantile country, that it's exploited. It's the world trading system, but nobody knows what level of damage they would have to incur themselves to set China back on a responsible world citizenship. And everybody says, I can't do it. It'd be too costly. So they've let China get away with what it's done.
Great breakdown there from our friend Victor Davis Hanson, the one and only VDH. Folks, be sure to check him out, the Victor Davis Hanson Show on the Daily Signal. And you see him on Fox News, across X, follow him there. Just one of the most brilliant minds and greatest historians in America today. Always love sitting down with him and getting his wisdom. Hey, some things to keep in mind, to pray about. Phase 2, as we're discussing here. Does Hamas lay down its arms voluntarily? Again, color me skeptical. How does that look? And right now, there's an onslaught. Hamas jihadis killing civilians, killing its opponents, so-called Israeli collaborators. So that can't continue. So the days to come, I believe, will be very pivotal. So keep that in mind as you are praying also. And President Trump announced this last weekend. We're hearing rumblings that the Iranian regime, there they are, folks, they haven't gone away. They're looking to rebuild, surprise, surprise, their nuclear program, their ballistic missile program. And I would not be shocked in the next few months if you see Israel and or the United States conducting a new operation against Iran, against any attempt to rebuild its nuclear armaments, and of course its ballistic missile stockpiles. Wow, we live in perilous times, but biblical times. God is moving, prophetic times, so be encouraged. Thanks so much for joining us here today on the Watchman Newscast. Until next time, God bless you, and remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.